So before I talk about the remaining 7 games that's going to happen in this week, Heineken Rivalry Week, I just want to quickly talk about the new logo that the Quakes Sports Venture have just released. And this, of course, is a logo that released a couple of days ago. And in many ways, it's another big disrespect and big slap in the face in the Save the Crew movement, and certainly to the Columbus Crew fan base. And when you look at this logo, you know, I think that this logo is actually not bad. I mean, to put the disrespect and certainly the kind of premature kind of logo launch that Anthony Precourt won, even though it is still not official that Columbus would be moving to Austin in the upcoming years. You know, when I look at this logo, it's actually an okay logo. I mean, you know, the logo is a black and green kind of theme logo, and inside the logo it does have a oak tree, and the oak tree has like 11 leaves, and there's also the root at the bottom. And I think the root probably kind of symbolize what Columbus is, because Columbus is always considered the root of MLS, since they are the first team to be arrived in MLS and the first team announced to be in MLS. And I know that a couple of days ago I also saw like a Twitter kind of post talking about the root and how it compared to one of the tifo that the Columbus Crew had in one of the game, and talk about the root in the bottom where it has all the Columbus Crew kind of logo, both past and present. But yeah, I mean, in many ways, I would say the logo is not bad. Of course, the team name now we know is going to be Austin FC, and I'll let you decide what FC actually stands for. A lot of people have already know what exactly FC actually stands for Austin. It's not called Football Club, but it's more like formerly Columbus or Fuck Columbus in the extreme way. But I'll let you decide what FC really kind of stands for in Precourt's new team. But, you know, obviously, like I said, this is just a logo kind of announcement, and they also just kind of show us the render of the Austin MLS team stadium, and the stadium actually looked really kind of decent. I'm not gonna lie, it's definitely a very kind of unique kind of stadium, and certainly one of the more beautiful stadium in MLS. And as much as it's hard to say this, when I look at the Columbus and the Save the Crew kind of movement and how they put the new stadium that the Columbus Crew would potentially get, I feel like the Austin kind of stadium is a little bit better than the Columbus Crew new stadium that they potentially put. But like I said, you know, there's still no official announcement that Austin is going to get a new team and that the Columbus Crew will be moving to Austin in the upcoming years. This is just kind of a logo kind of announcement, and just kind of a more kind of big FU to Columbus, and a big kind of just Precourt putting 2 more middle finger at Columbus and saying that he is definitely gonna get his team in Austin. But either way, with that being said, let's actually talk about the 7 games that is gonna happen in this Heineken Rivalry Week weekend. Obviously, we already had 5 games so far, and originally I was gonna do my preview tonight, but the reason why I'm not doing it tonight is because there's only 3 games that has been played, and that there's going to be 2 more games tomorrow. And what I'm going to do is that I'm going to review those 5 games tomorrow, and then I'm going to just review the 7 other games that's going to happen on Sunday. So this is kind of like a 2-part kind of Heineken Rivalry preview, and that I already done part 1 a couple of days ago. Now it's part 2, and part 2, of course, of the review will happen on Sunday, and part 1 will happen tomorrow. But when you look at all these rivalry games, you know, certainly some of them have some unique feature, but we can all agree that some of them have a lot of big playoff implication. And the first game, although it's not really a rivalry between the Union and the Revs, in many ways, it's kind of a rivalry in terms of battling for those last two playoff spots, because for the second week in a row, the Revs are involved in a 6-pointer kind of game and involved in a team that is fighting for playoffs and kind of like on that bubble of potentially making the playoffs. And this is also the second time in 3 weeks that both of these teams has played. 2 weeks ago when New England played against Philly at Foxborough, New England of course lost that one. The Revs or the Union was able to get a 3-2 win over the Revs. And New England, of course, coming into this game, they are winless in 8 straight, while the Union just beat NYCFC 2-0 at home and made a huge statement by beating them. So when I look at this game, obviously the Revs will certainly, or the Union would certainly be heavy favorite in this game. But for the Revs, they got to win this game. I mean, right now, the Revs are just a sinking ship right now, and the more that they will not figure a way to stop the bleeding and just stop this miserable 8-game skip that they are on, they are potentially going to be missing the playoffs, and they could potentially end up to be like what Chicago is right now. And in some way, they're kind of like the Chicago Fire right now, consider of how they were once a team that was above the red line and looked comfortable above the red line, and now they find themselves sinking down the Eastern Conference table. So yeah, this is a big game for New England, and for the Union, if they lose this game, I guess it's not a good result for them because they lose at home and that they lose to one of the team that is battling for the playoffs. But if they do lose this game, they will still guarantee themselves above the red line because, New England, of course, are 4 points behind Philly. So New England have no possibility of passing Philly. And keep in mind, Philly actually have 2 more games in hand over the team that is just below them in 6th place, that is Montreal, even though both of them are kind of tied on points right now. So Philly does have some leeway in terms of their playoff chances, and I would say that a loss for them doesn't mean that their playoff hope is completely gone and that things could get dicey, but it's just that for the Revs, like I said again, this is an absolute must-win for them. If they do not win this game, then they are screwed. They are done for the playoffs. There's just no way how in the world can I still see this Revs team going through this 9-game winless run and expect them to eventually finally turn it around. But moving on into the next game, and another game that has a lot of playoff implication. And speaking of Montreal, they of course will be playing against TFC in the 401 Derby. This is the second meeting between both of these teams. The first meeting, Montreal of course beat TFC, and that was all the way back in March and all the way back in the second game of the season. And for the Impact, like I said, they're just above the red line in that 6th position. They have a 4-point gap over New England, but New England has 2 games in hand over them. And TFC, of course, are 9 points out of the playoffs, and that they have the same amount of gameplay to the Union than it is for the TFC, and also they have 2 games in hand over New England. So, I think in some way this is kind of a must-win for both of these teams, but I think it's a very more important game for TFC than it is for Montreal, because for TFC, I think they would have been in maybe a little bit more of a better position if they did beat San Jose in that midweek game, or not that midweek game, but the game over the weekend. And the fact that they're still just 9 point out and that time is just running out on them, and the fact that they still have some very tough game coming up, this is a team that they should definitely be able to handle, and certainly this is one of the easiest teams that they will potentially face down the stretch. And also the fact that this game is at home, and TFC tends to do very well against Montreal at at home in the 401 Derby. And also, what's interesting about this game is that Josie Altidore will not be playing in this game. Disco just announced a day ago that Josie Altidore would receive an additional game suspension after he got that red card against NYCFC, and that is a huge blow to this TFC team. I mean, we already saw what happened when they did not have Josie Altidore in that Quakes game, and how even when they did bring on their big guns and bring on Sebastian Javinko on to the game, they really struggle in that one. And even throughout the season when they do not have Josie Altidore, and how it just feel like this TFC team is not the same without him. And now they're coming into this game without him. You know, it is going to be a big task. And certainly you got to think that other guys around this team should be able to step up. And I also heard that Victor Vasquez is still kind of injured for this team, or at least I think he should be back into the line. I'm not quite sure if he's injured or not. He didn't play in that game against San Jose, and I'm pretty sure he wasn't even on the bench for that game, so he must be injured in that one. So yeah, you know, this is going to be another one of those cases where TFC is going to come into a game shorthanded, which has been very common so far this season. And it's just, in many ways, it's kind of bad luck that TFC kind of endured with the injury that they had to battle, and the fact that they also have to battle with the earlier season where they had to, like, kind of almost giving up games just for the commitment of CCL. And, you know, I think maybe that could potentially take a toll, and maybe that might be the reason why they missed the playoffs. And if that's the reason they missed the playoff, then I don't think the fans should be that upset about it. And keep in mind, this TFC team is going to be going to CCL next time, and you just wonder, if they don't make the playoffs, would that be a better thing for them if they do make the playoffs? Because if they miss the playoffs, then they will have more time to prepare for CCL in February and get that recovery time. But if they do make the playoffs, and let's say if they do make a deep run in the playoffs, then yeah, you talk about 3 straight year in the playoff. And if they go on a deep run, 3 straight deep run, and you had a CCL kind of commitment last season where you gone very deep, you know, it's gonna really take a toll to this team. But you know, for Montreal, like I said, you know, they are just above the red line, and they're kind of in this kind of sticky situation where they have played the most game, and that they are just kind of barely hanging on. And I'm pretty sure Montreal fan will really root for the Union in that Philly versus New England game, because if the Union could beat New England in that one, then Montreal actually would have a better points per game ratio than New England would have, because if Montreal win this one, they would build up a 7-point gap, and if New England lose that one, you know, they gain those points from there, and at that point, even if New England has 2 games in hand, they would still be 1 game short of Montreal. But meanwhile, moving on into the next one, Sporting KC, they play against Minnesota, and Sporting KC has been kind of going through a resurgence lately with 3 straight win and also 3 straight game without conceding a goal. Well, Minnesota are winless in 4 games, and I don't really need to mention a lot about this game or talk a lot about this game, because it's pretty predictable of what's going to happen in this game, and that is Sporting KC should be able to beat Minnesota. And heck, they beat them 4-1 last time at Children's Mercy Park, so I don't see how they won't do it again, and especially how the Sporting KC team looks so much better in these last 3 weeks. Almost looked like a team that we all know in the beginning of the season. You know, I should expect Sporting KC to win this one. And, you know, for Minnesota, unfortunately, you know, your hope of making the playoffs is officially gone. And, you know, the only thing I will say about Minnesota, and maybe the only slim hope that they might have, is that they better pray Darwin Quintero can suit up for this game. Because if Quintero does not suit up for this game and he can't play in this one, then Minnesota is doomed. There's no chance they're gonna actually win this one. Meanwhile, moving on into the next one, the Rocky Mountain Derby between Colorado and RSL. This is, of course, the third meeting between both of these teams. RSL, of course, won the first meeting 3-0, while they both drew 2-2 in the last meeting. And, for RSL, this is a massive opportunity for them to get a road win. And, we talk about RSL this season and how much they struggle on the road and how they finally got a much-needed road win. Granted, a kind of lucky road win against the Houston Dynamo last week. This is a big opportunity for them to get a road win against a Rapids team. Although the Rapids, they would love nothing more to spoil their biggest rival playoff chances. And keep in mind, Colorado still have a chance to win the Rocky Mountain Cup. If Colorado, of course, win this, and I think if they win this, they would actually win the Rocky Mountain Cup, because I'm not quite sure how exactly the Rocky Mountain Cup work, but I have a feeling they probably go in terms of goal differential if all those 3 meetings with both team winning 1 game apiece and then a game ends in a draw. And I think they probably look at the away goals kind of record, and so far the Rapids have 2 away goals, and as long as they don't concede more than 2 away goals, then I think Colorado should be able to win the Rocky Mountain Cup. I don't know. If you're an RSL fan or a Colorado Rapids fan, can you please confirm in the comments that is actually correct, or I'm just talking a lot of rubbish again. But yeah, the Rapids, they still have something to fight for, even though technically they are kind of out of the playoffs. And this Rapids team definitely have looked much better in these last couple of weeks. And yes, they did lose to LAFC in that game last week, but they definitely look very good in that LAFC game, and they only lost because they kind of got outclassed in that one. This is a good opportunity for them to once again play very well. And if they do play something very similar to that game against LAFC and the way they've been playing in the last couple of games, then they could definitely cause some problem for this RSL team. And, I just wonder, how is this RSL team going to break down this very organized Rapids team? Because that Rapids defense has been super organized and been making a lot of headaches to their opponent in their last couple of games. But meanwhile, moving on into the next one, San Jose. They, of course, play against the Vancouver Whitecaps, and I called this game the Forgotten Derby. And the reason why I call this the Forgotten Derby is because both of these teams are kind of like the forgotten team. San Jose, the Quakes are kind of the forgotten team in the California Freeze. With LA FC and LA Galaxy now both kind of having their own rivalry, which is why that there's no Cali Clasico. I mean, if LAFC weren't in the league right now, then most likely this week we would be playing against the LA Galaxy. But because they're in the league, they have to play in that El Tráfico, and certainly it's sad to kind of mention this, but the Cali Clasico is definitely less important than El Tráfico. I mean, it's not even a discussion, and this is coming from a Quakes fan too. Well, Vancouver, they always been known as the forgotten team in the Cascadia Derby because Portland and Seattle always get the media attention, and they kind of like always been the forgotten team. Even when they do play against Portland or Seattle, it's not really kind of a Cascadia Derby between both of those teams. But, when you look at this matchup, Vancouver have been unbeaten in 4 games, and they have got a couple of big results. But I just have a feeling that this could potentially be the game where the Quakes can finally snap out of that winless run at home. I mean, I just think that this just cannot continue with the way that we've been playing at home and how long it's been since we have last tasted victory. And we have been doing pretty well against the Whitecaps in recent memory, as I mentioned back in my Quakes preview. But yeah, we shall see what happened in this game. And, we have another chance to play spoiler in this game, trying to spoil Vancouver's chance of making the playoffs. And certainly for the Whitecaps, they definitely want to win this game, because this is probably the easiest game that they will get all season long. And, if they can't take care of business in this game, then their playoff hope is going to take a huge, huge blow. And especially with the fact that the team that they're battling to try to get above the red line, the Seattle Sounders, are just in fuego mode right now. There's just no room for air for this Whitecaps team to make. And, this is a game that they got to win if they want to keep pace with other team in terms of trying to get above the red line. Meanwhile, moving on into the next game, the Red Bulls, they take on DC United, and this game has two big implications, but for two different reasons. For the Red Bulls, the implication for them is supporter shield. That draw against NYCFC certainly was a disappointing draw, considering the fact that they were down to 9 men. Or not down to 9 men, but NYCFC were down to 9 men, and they still couldn't able to get a victory over them. Although, to be fair, that game was at Yankee Stadium, and you will know that it doesn't really matter if you go down to 10 or 9 men at Yankee Stadium. You're always going to be at even strength because of how small that field is, which I, of course, will talk a little bit more about that when I do the review tomorrow. But yeah, certainly the Red Bulls feel like that was a big kind of missed opportunity and pretty much a big 2-point drop in terms of the Supporters Shield standings. And now they have to play against DC United, and this is a DC United team that is literally on fuego mode too. I mean, this DC United team is literally like the Seattle Sounders of the Eastern Conference, where they have won 4 out of their last 5 games, and that they are on a 5-game unbeaten streak, and they just came off of a 9-point week. Yeah, that is fuego mode, alright, and this DC United team is playing with all sort of confidence whatsoever, and I just think that this is gonna definitely be a very good game, and it's gonna be interesting to see how the Red Bulls will handle this DC United team, and I hope they do not underestimate this DC United team. This DC United team is nothing like the DC United team we know before they moved to Audi Field. This DC United team looks so much stronger, and a lot of that, of course, have to do with Wayne Rooney coming into that team and just really put a spark on that team. But, the Red Bulls, the last thing they need to do in this game is to underestimate DC United and think that this is an easy opponent that they can just walk over at home, because they can't, and they're going to have to really work hard to try to get a win. And, I think, I wouldn't say this is an absolute must-win for them if they want to keep their hopes in terms of their supporter shield kind of race, but it kind of feels like it's a must-win for them, and it kind of also feels like it's a must-win for the rest of the way, consider how good Atlanta is. And it feels like every time Atlanta has a challenger for that supporter shield race, Atlanta just basically laugh them off and basically go on a winning streak to blow away other team that is challenging them in the supporter shield race. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what the Red Bulls have done. And also, congratulations to Bradley Wright Phillips, also known as BWP, getting his 200 career goals. I'm pretty sure I will mention it again in tomorrow's review, but just a quick congratulations to him on that. And for DC United, can they continue this charge, and can they potentially actually make the playoffs? Because right now, with the way that they're playing, yes, they definitely can make the playoffs. They're definitely charging up. And teams like New England and Montreal, and I think especially Montreal, has to be really scared right now with DC United of them just charging up the table. But moving on into the last game of this week, and save for the best for last, it is the Cascadia Derby between Portland and Seattle. This, of course, is the last Cascadia Derby of this year. Portland, of course, won the first two meetings. They won 1-0 in the first meeting at Providence Park, while they beat Seattle 3-2 at CenturyLink. But Seattle is pretty much like what DC United is, which is in Fuego mode and absolutely on fire, and probably the hottest team right now in MLS. And Portland right now could consider be one of the coldest team in MLS. I mean, Portland is coming into this game having lost 3 straight after win on a 15-game record-breaking unbeaten streak. And you know this Sounders team really want nothing more than coming to Providence Park and trying to get some revenge after what happened in the first game of the season and also what happened in the second game of the season. And yeah, this is going to be a very, very tough game. And for Portland, you know, keep in mind, because the fact that they now lost 3 games in a row, they actually find themselves now just literally right above the red line. They're actually 6th in the standing, and they're actually not that far away from dropping out of the red line. In fact, Portland is 6th place in the Western Conference standing, and Seattle, they are 7th place. There's only a 2-point gap between both of these teams, and in some way you could kind of argue this is kind of like the same situation we had with the Union versus Revs game, where there's a very kind of tiny gap between both of these teams. And if Seattle does win this one, then they would leapfrog Portland, and Portland would drop below the red line. I mean, think about that. 4 weeks ago, Portland were on a historic unbeaten streak, and now they could potentially drop out of the red line in the Western Conference. I mean, that just shows you how crazy MLS is, and that just shows you how that's kind of the Western Conference in a nutshell. I mean, the Western Conference, you know, there's an old saying that the West is always wild, and why everybody call it the Wild Wild West. Right now, the Western Conference is the Wild Wild West. I mean, the gaps between the playoff line and the red line is just so tiny, and the gap between 1st through 8th place is not by that much. I mean, you could be a team that could go on a good run, but then you can struggle for the last couple of games and start to develop a losing streak, and you can find yourself below the red line. That is how great it is, and that's why I am so excited for September and just seeing what's going to happen with some of these teams that is jumble up in the playoff line. And I'm pretty sure every Western Conference team would know that they are not safe. I mean, every Western Conference team except maybe if you're below 8th place. So teams like Minnesota, Houston, Quakes, and Rapids, I'm sorry, you're not, of course, part of this conversation. But if you're a team that is in the top 8, then there is a big possibility that you could either finish in 1st place, or there's a possibility that you can drop below the red line. That is why I just love this scenario, and I cannot wait how this is going to play out. But, you know, going back to the Cascadia Derby, as I kind of got a little bit off track there because of the excitement of the Western Conference. You know, it's a big game, certainly for both teams, and, you know, the Sounders are just red hot right now. They're just not only right now finding ways to score goals, but this team just, they are like a brick wall right now in that defense. Nobody can really get past this defense, and I think a lot of that has to do with probably Chad Marshall being just probably the best defender right now in the league, and just kind of using his inner kind of Chad Marshall kind of performance that he used to have to just completely revamp this Sounders back line. And like I said, the Sounders, it just feel like every single game they always find a way to score. They don't really have a true goal scorer on this team, and they certainly are slow as hell in terms of development play, but yet they still somehow find a way to score goals. And when I look at this Portland team and how not only the defense are starting to look a little bit iffy, but also the attack, you know, goals are started to dry out in the Portland kind of camp, and you know, I would think the Sounders would definitely be favorites in this game, despite the fact that this one is at Providence Park. But you never know. It's the Cascadia Derby. I mean, you know, in a Cascadia Derby, anybody can win. Forms doesn't mean anything whatsoever. So I am very interested to see this game. But either way, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like. Smash that subscribe button. Let me know in the comments below, what do you think of those 7 games? Make sure you leave your prediction below of these 7 games in the comment section. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys next time.